Welcome to the Deep Dive from the Crypto Visionary Network. For years, we've heard this promise in crypto, right? Fast, free, accessible digital cash for everyone.
Yeah, that's kind of the holy grail, isn't it?
Exactly. But has anyone actually delivered? Today, we're looking at Nano XNO, a project that, was basically built from the ground up to try and do just that. So we're digging into a digital currency that really takes a different path, challenges those sort of traditional blockchain ideas.
Right.
Our plan today will unpack Nano, start with the real basics, for anyone maybe new to crypto or just new to Nano itself.
Good idea.
And then we'll get more into the technical stuff, the nitty-gritty for the enthusiasts out there. We'll cover its history, what it's used for, what it's really good at.
And maybe what it's not so good at, the challenges.
Exactly. Challenges, the community, any cool projects using it, and how it stacks up against others.
Sounds like a plan. But first, that important bit we always have to mention.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so just to remember, everyone, the information we're sharing today, we've gathered it from lots of different places online, used some AI tools to help compile it. We always try our best to be accurate.
We do, but...
mistakes can happen, misinformation can creep in. So please, nothing we say here is financial advice.
Definitely not.
It's purely for education, maybe a bit of entertainment. Always do your own research. Use your common sense.
Next, couldn't say it better myself. Right, let's jump in. What is Nano, fundamentally?
Okay, so at its heart, Nano's designed to be super eco-friendly digital cash, just for sending money person-to-person, peer-to-peer payments.
Right.
But the two things that really make people sit up are, it aims to be completely feeless.
Zero fees.
Zero fees. And practically instant, like confirmed in under a second, usually.
Okay, that's a big claim in the crypto world. Right. How did it start? I know it wasn't always called Nano.
That's right. It began life as Rayblocks, XRB. It was actually a side project started by Colin Lemahieu back in, I think, 2014.
Just a side project.
Yeah, initially. He's a software guy, worked at places like Dell, Qualcomm. He just had this idea for, much more efficient digital money. Yeah. Eventually, it became his full-time thing.
And how did they get the coins out there? Not mining, right?
No mining. They used a faucet system. Basically just gave the coins away for free, often for completing simple tasks like CAPTCHAs. That faucet stopped distributing coins in late 2017.
So the entire supply is already out there.
Exactly. All distributed years ago. No inflation from mining.
Which brings us back to that huge question. Feeless and instant. How on earth does that work without mining, without the usual blockchain queues and costs?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, technologically speaking. Nano doesn't use a single blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum. It uses something called a block lattice architecture.
Block lattice, okay.
Yeah, and it's based on a directed acyclic graph, a DAGA structure. So instead of everyone writing to one big shared ledger, every single Nano account gets its own blockchain. They call it an account chain.
Your own personal blockchain.
Kind of, like your own personal ledger. When you make a transaction, it's just a block added to your chain signed with your private key.
Okay.
So if I want to send you some Nano, I create a send block on my chain. Then, for the transaction to complete, you need to create a receive block on your chain.
So it's a two-step process.
Exactly. A send and a receive. The funds are sort of pending until you actively receive them.
Does that mean I need to be online to get the money?
Well, yeah, your wallet or node needs to create that receive block. So the recipient's end does need to be active at some point to finalize it. But the network itself validates everything constantly.
Okay, so these individual account chains, how does that impact speed and scalability for the whole network? Because that's usually the bottleneck, right?
Precisely. Because your transaction only really involves your chain and the receiver's chain, you're not competing with thousands of others for space in the next global block.
No fighting for block space.
Exactly. That's what leads to the near-instant confirmations, often less than a second. And theoretically, this structure means it can scale much, much better. Some even say unlimited scalability, though obviously there are real-world limits.
Thousands of transactions per second, potentially.
That's the idea. There was actually a study comparing it to Bitcoin under load.
Oh, yeah. What did it find?
Well, as the transaction rate went up, Bitcoin's confirmation time, the latency, shot up dramatically. From like 38 seconds to almost 245 seconds in one test scenario.
Wow.
But Nano's latency only increased slightly in the same tests, maybe from 26 seconds to around 44 seconds. The takeaway was that Nano scaled much better with more nodes and handled the higher throughput without that massive latency jump.
That's a pretty stark difference. And what about the environmental side? You mentioned eco-friendly. No mining must mean.
A tiny energy footprint. It's one of his biggest selling points. A nano transaction uses something like 0.11 watt hours.
0.11.
Yeah, 0.0000112 kilowatt hours. Compare that to Bitcoin's estimate of what, 950 kilowatt hours per transaction?
Yeah.
It's minuscule.
So small you can barely measure it.
Pretty much. I read somewhere the whole network could potentially run on the power from just one wind turbine.
That's incredible. So if there's no mining, how does the network agree on transactions? What's the consensus mechanism?
It uses something called open representative voting, or ORV. It's basically a form of delegated proof of stake.
Delegated proof of stake. Okay.
So instead of mining, you as a nano holder choose a representative node to vote on your behalf.
Like a proxy vote.
Exactly. The more nano that's delegated to a specific representative, the more voting weight that representative has when validating transactions. If there's a conflict, like a double spend attempt, these representatives vote, and the transaction with the most vote weight wins.
And these representatives, they don't get paid in Nano for doing this.
No, not directly. There are no block rewards or transaction fees to hand out. The incentive is considered to be the overall health and utility of the network itself. If you use Nano, especially if you're a business relying on it, you have an incentive to run a node or delegate to a reliable one to keep the network secure and fast.
Interesting. So super fast, zero fees, very green. How is it actually being used? What are people doing with Nano out there?
Well, the primary goal is real-world payments. Just paying for stuff, online checkouts, maybe in stores eventually. The speed and lack of fees make it really suitable for that.
Makes sense.
And that lack of fees also makes it perfect for micropayments and tipping. Things where even a small fee would kill the transaction.
Like sending a tiny tip online.
Yeah, exactly. Like there are Reddit tip bots. People use it for small payouts and things like fantasy sports leagues like win 1 nano this week.
Yeah.
Stuff that just wouldn't work with fees.
Right. Anything else?
Cross-border transfers are another big one. Sending money internationally without waiting days or paying hefty bank fees.
Yeah, that's a classic crypto use case.
And for traders, its speed makes it a good trading pair on exchanges, moving value quickly between other cryptos without losing bits to fees.
Okay. Any weird or unexpected uses?
Yeah, the community gets creative. People have used it for things like identity verification systems, some kind of remote control applications. I even saw someone talking about triggering a physical light bulb to turn on via a nano transaction.
A light bulb? Seriously?
Yeah, just shows the possibilities when transactions are instant and free, I guess. People experiment.
That's pretty cool. So tell me about that community. What's the general feeling around Nano?
They're known for being super active and communicative, especially on places like Reddit and Discord. There's a big focus on trying to onboard regular people, normies, or crypto noobs.
Making it easy to get started.
Yeah, making it fun, not intimidating. They use a lot of games and simple faucets sometimes. There's an event planned in Nigeria, Biz Merchant 2025, aiming to get hundreds of local people using Nano for payments, learning about borderless money.
That sounds practical.
It is. And the wallets help too.
Right.
Things like Kalium or Natrium are often praised for being really simple and user-friendly. People often just give out paper wallets with a small amount of Nano on them, scan a QR code, and boom, you're using crypto.
Nice entry point. Now, you mentioned Rayblocks before. Isn't there another related coin? Nano?
Ah, yes, Banano.
Oh.
Ban. It's a fork of Nano.
A fork.
Meaning it started with Nano's code. So it shares that core tech, feeless, instant, the DAG structure. But Banano is much more focused on memes, fun, community projects, and gamification. Lots of folding at home participation, too.
So same tech, different vibe.
Pretty much. And interestingly, the Banano devs sometimes work on tech that ends up benefiting Nano, too. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. No project is perfect. What are the challenges Nano has faced or is still dealing with?
Right. It hasn't all been smooth sailing. A big one was the spam attacks back in March 2021.
Spam attacks? What happened?
Basically, someone flooded the network with huge numbers of tiny, insignificant transactions, which congested things and slowed confirmations right down for a while.
Ouch. How did they fix that?
They've implemented better transaction prioritization since then, and also added a very small proof of work requirement for each block, not for consensus, but just to rate limit transactions. It takes maybe 5 seconds for a normal computer to generate, but only a microsecond to verify. It makes spamming much more expensive for the attacker.
So a hurdle, but they adapted. What else? You mentioned the node incentive.
Yeah, the incentive for node runners, or lack thereof in terms of direct payment, that's a constant point of debate. Critics say without rewards, why would enough people run nodes to keep the network decentralized and secure?
And the counter-argument is utility.
Right. Businesses using Nano benefit directly from a healthy network, so they run nodes. The cost is apparently pretty low, maybe $3 a month per node. But it's still a different model than most POS coins.
Okay. Any other risks?
Well, there's the voting centralization concern. A lot of Nano is held on big exchanges like Binance and Kraken.
Right.
And because voting weight is based on holdings, these exchanges control a big chunk of the vote, potentially over 35% combined. While they likely wouldn't attack the network, it's a centralization risk. Theoretically, they could collude to halt the network, a liveness attack, though they couldn't steal funds.
Yeah, reliance on exchanges is always tricky.
And related to that is the risk of offline representatives. If a big representative goes offline, but people have still delegated their votes to it, that voting weight is essentially inactive, which could potentially weaken consensus temporarily if too many go offline.
Okay. What about just getting people to use it? Adoption?
That's definitely been a challenge. Market adoption and liquidity. Despite the tech, Nano hasn't achieved that mainstream breakthrough yet. Liquidity is okay, but still quite concentrated on a few big exchanges. Some say the Nano Foundation perhaps focused too much on tech and not enough on marketing or partnerships in the past.
Yeah, tech alone isn't always enough.
And you can't ignore past incidents. The big one was the Big Grail exchange hack years ago.
Oh, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, a lot of users lost funds on that Italian exchange. It wasn't a hack of Nano itself, but the exchange. Still, it led to lawsuits, with some arguing Nano didn't do enough to warn users or distance itself from BitGrail, even though they knew there were issues. Eventually, an Italian court did order the BitGrail owner to repay the funds.
Right, so reputational damage from third parties. Okay, so looking forward, what's Nano working on now? What's on the roadmap?
They're definitely still developing. One thing is a new Nano proof-of-work infrastructure. This is aimed at making the anti-spam POW system more robust and easier to update if needed.
Makes sense after the attacks.
They're also working on ledger pruning. Because every account has its own chain, the ledger can grow quite large over time for nodes. Pruning would allow nodes to discard older history safely, reducing storage needs.
That seems important for long-term node health.
Yeah, and it's tied to implementing universal blocks. Right now, Nano uses different block types for sends, receives, changing your representative, etc. Universal blocks would streamline this into a single block type.
Simplifying things internally.
Exactly. Should make the code cleaner, potentially enable other optimizations down the line too. And beyond the tech, there's talk of pushing more for merchant adoption, getting to more global markets, and even an alpha of a point-of-sale system.
So trying to bridge that gap to real-world use.
Seems like it. More focus on getting it into people's hands, literally.
Okay. So wrapping things up then.
Yeah, I mean, Nano is, it's definitely a standout project technically. Fearless, instant, green. That's a powerful combination, right?
Right.
Powered by that unique block lattice and ORV. It really does offer a clear alternative for just simple payments and micropayments.
It really does. And its story, I think, highlights this tension you see a lot in crypto. You have this potentially groundbreaking tech designed for pure utility, but it's competing in a market often driven by hype and speculation, not necessarily just usefulness. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world pushing for efficiency, for sustainability, will that pure utility, that elegance of design like Nano's, eventually win out? Or will speculation always dominate?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the million-nano question.
Indeed. Something for you all to think about. That brings us to the end of this deep dive from the Crypto Visionary Network. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And just that final reminder, all this info came from various online sources put together with AI help. Errors are possible. It's not financial advice, just education and entertainment. Please, do your own research, use your head.